Hey everyone! I'm Albert Boris. Mario Circuits. This is a track type that I don't really see people talking about when it comes to Mario Kart. Everyone knows about Rainbow Road and Bowser's Castle, but no one ever really brings up Mario Circuits in discussions. Not that I'm necessarily surprised, they're kind of basic after all, but they're still a course archetype that have appeared in every game in the series, since Super Mario Kart, which is why today I wanted to take a look at them all and rank them from worst to best to see which iterations are the most memorable. And actually, they're not that basic. They're beginner tracks, sure, but I've always found it interesting how even though this is Mario Kart, Mario Circuits have almost never been the first tracks of the games. Instead, they're usually chilling somewhere in the Flower Cup, while a simpler track is in the Mushroom Cup. The main difference is usually that Mario Circuits have a very strong nature theme, while whatever the opening circuit is, instead opts for a more generic Formula 1 raceway theme. But yeah, so there's still some charm in Mario Circuits, partly because I also love nature themes. So with all of that being said, I say, let's get started with this ranking. First, opening up with the D tier, we have the Mario circuits that I simply don't like to play on at all. Not all of them are awful, but I'd rather not waste 3 minutes of my life on them. And speaking of free, the absolute worst offender is and will probably always be Mario Circuit 3 from Super Mario Kart. This is one of the most bland, boring, and yet frustrating Mario Kart tracks of all time, let alone Mario Circuits. This whole track is just a bunch of turns with some oil puddles, pipes, and also a dash panel at the end. There's basically no personality, and while that may be somewhat unfair to say, seeing as the SNES had limitations, other flat tracks have still managed to pull it off with what they had, even in this game. With SNES Mario Circuit 3, it's just a perfectly symmetrical track, where every turn feels the same. It gets repetitive pretty quickly. The only time it doesn't feel that way is halfway through, when you have to pull off a 180-degree turn, which is way too sharp. Suddenly, the track goes from boring to just frustrating. It doesn't matter what I do, I always keep bumping into the pipes, or I just drift too early. The fact that this is the most remade Mario Kart course in history, tied with SNES Rainbow Road, is also just insulting. The only notable thing that changed in future incarnations was improved controls, but honestly, the fact that it's been kept alive for so long just makes me sad. Just kill it already. So yeah, pretty awful track all around. If anything, D tier is not harsh enough. This one goes to F tier. I hate it! And almost just as hateable from the same game is Mario Circuit 1. The first Mario Kart track of all time. And also the only Mario circuit to ever open up a game. Obviously, since it was the first track in the series, it's expected why it's so simple. It's only got a total of 5 turns, doesn't have a lot of obstacles, and merely serves as an introduction to how this game works. But does that make it better than other more interesting Mario circuits? No. At the very least, it's pretty short, so I never really have time to get bored, and in a game like Super Mario Kart, where every track controls like rubbish, it's a breath of fresh air, I guess. Still, it's very boring. And so is the DS remake as well, as far as we're concerned. So, those are the 2 weakest Mario circuits. However, when it comes to the most forgettable Mario circuit, in 12th place we have the GBA rendition for Mario Kart Super Circuit. Look, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it, but this has got to be the most unmemorable Mario Kart track that I've ever played. No joke. Even Peach Circuit in the same game at least had an oversaturated castle. What does GBA Mario Circuit have? Well, I mean, I guess there's this long U-turn, which I never even noticed exists. And there's also this useless detour with a dash panel, but otherwise, no, this is comically generic. The only reason it's not last is because at least it's neither annoying nor unusually short. And I do kind of fancy the skybox, but otherwise it's got nothing. Now, the next placement might be slightly controversial, depending on how much of a cult classic status this might have, but the worst 3D Mario circuit has got to be the Wii version. Mario Kart Wii might have been the first Mario game I ever played as a kid, next to Mario Party 9, but even with the immense nostalgia I have for it, this thing is not good. The theme is nice, I guess. I like how heavily it leans into the forest theme, and the townish area at the start is pretty charming, even if you don't really drive through it. The problem is that the layout is just a long figure 8. All you're really doing is avoiding occasional Goombas and the chain jump. Otherwise, it's just one of the most simple tracks ever. If it wasn't for the fact that it also has one of the coolest intended shortcuts in the game, at least for being an early track, this could have been even lower. Lastly, for our final bad Mario circuit, we have Wii U Mario Circuit from Mario Kart 8. This one looks cool on the surface, but it's probably the very best definition we have of all style, no substance. Just like Wii Mario Circuit, this is just a figure 8. Oh, but it goes upside down, so it's totally different. For what it's worth, I do think the style at least makes up for something worthwhile. The way the whole track is actually hovering high above the ground is pretty cool, and while it doesn't change the layout, the way it twists all around at least feels neat. The music is also pretty down to earth, as ironic as that is to say, but on the whole, this is another track that's just a bit too simple. Thankfully, those are also the only 5 Mario circuits that I consider to be kind of bad. Not awful, besides Mario Circuit 3, but definitely not on my good side. Now, let's go over to the C tier, where every track is at least average, starting with Remix Mario Circuit 1. Yeah, I'm gonna include this track as well in my ranking. Even if you don't like Mario Kart Tour and don't consider it mainline, it's just one more Mario Circuit added to the ranking anyways. Skip it if you don't want to see it. So, Mario Kart Tour didn't just introduce brand new tracks, but it also gave us remix tracks, which were basically SNES courses but reimagined with more modern elements. So Choco Island has ramps, Donut Plains has lily pads, and Ghost Valley has stairs, to name a few. And for Mario Circuit, you can drive on top of bricks. That's kind of cool, I guess. I mean, the layout is fairly unimaginative as it's pretty short and also has these long, smooth turns, which makes it pretty easy. But the fact that there's actually a few ramps and you don't have to just drive on the road does make it a bit less boring, since it doesn't feel as flat this way. Plus, there's even 2 big jumps at the end, and I'm all for that. So while it's still kind of underwhelming, I don't have any qualms about it. Now, following this, the ranking starts to get kind of tricky, as these next few tracks are all pretty close in quality. But in 8th place, we have GCN Mario Circuit. Now I do understand why this one is considered underrated by many. Most Mario Circuits are pretty easy tracks, but this one always stood out for being slightly harder than its peers. There's a few more tight turns, and there's a lot more difficult hazards to avoid, making it one of the more memorable Mario Circuits. But I don't know. For me, the difficulty with this track stems more from the fact that Mario Kart Double Dash just isn't a very well-controlling game. Obviously, when everything is so slippery, of course it feels more difficult, but not in a fair way. On the surface, avoiding a chain jump, munching piranha plants, and getting through a bunch of stupid bumps isn't that bad, but because of the controls, now it is. Look, I'm all for difficulty, but GCN Mario Circuit just comes across as more obnoxious in how it's handled. And even though I like the GCN circuit music, the happy-go-lucky vibes are just a bit too irritating for this track. The Wii remake is definitely a bit better since the controls are more fair, and being able to trick off the bumps makes it feel more natural, but overall, even though this is one of the more unique Mario circuits, it's not too likable. It's a fine enough track, but I'd definitely rather spend my time on N64 Mario Circuit. Oh, actually, it's technically a raceway. Okay, I know it's Mario Raceway, but that was just a mistranslation, so I'm obviously still gonna include it. I think Mario Raceway for Mario Kart 64 is probably the most harmless one when it comes to the many Mario circuits. It doesn't have anything too noteworthy to be said about itself, but it's also perfectly playable, without anything bad. The music is pretty bland and generic, but when it comes to the course theme, there's actually a bit of charm to it that I've always held close to my heart. Because unlike other Mario circuits, which were always kind of lively, Mario Raceway feels so much more quiet. Literally, the only area with any sorts of NPCs is the starting line. Everywhere else, you're just driving on a hilly plainside, alone, with the occasional spinning Mario signs, and it feels so oddly surrealistic. No joke, one of my favorite pastimes back when I was a kid was that I would try to drive over this huge hill at the start because I wanted to see what lies beyond. Not that I really got far considering it was out of bounds, but still. Also, screw the Mario Kart Tour version for blocking off my access to it. Absolutely disgusting. But yeah, Mario Raceway. Pretty alright track. Lastly, for our final C-tier course, in 6th place we have GBA Mario Circuit. This time, the Wii U remake of it. Look, I don't care what anyone says, but even if this isn't the most impressive track on its own, as a retro track, it's kingly. I still remember seeing this remake for the first time and being absolutely blown away by what they did with it. Seriously, they took the most unimaginative track of all time and gave it possibly one of the biggest glow-ups to date, considering how mediocre it first was. I love how they took that random U-turn nobody cared about and just lifted that whole section up. It's such a cool way to give a standout feature to the track, but even apart from that, it's still pretty cozy. The visuals are gorgeous, and like Mario Raceway, it's another more quiet track with not a lot of NPCs or road hazards, and a more relaxing soundtrack. It's still a very, very simple track, and the majority of the layout is still kind of uninspired, but I definitely think that this track is unnecessarily underrated. Anyways, moving on. Now we're getting to the Mario circuits that I think are actually legitimately good, not just barely passable alright. Which, yes, that does include the final 2 SNES circuits on the list. Honestly, I'm a bit surprised myself, but for what it's worth, Mario Circuit 2 and 4 from that game just took a lot more advantage of the fact that they were on a weaker hardware. Mario Circuit 2, which is in 5th place for me, has always been especially iconic because despite being a SNES track, it's not annoying at all. The turns are much more generous, but not so much that it's boring, as the whole track keeps sort of building up as you approach the center. And then you get the big jump. It's the only track in the entirety of Super Mario Kart to have something like that, and remaking Mario Kart 7 further improves on it by turning it into a glider, with even an additional trampoline shortcut. So yeah, it's kind of a big deal. It still might seem a bit excessive to put this above the more immersive 3D circuits, but in all honesty, I also just think that the SNES Mario Circuit theme is one of the best ones. The music is classy, and the visuals really pop out. Mario Circuit 1 and 3 may not have been saved by this due to their many other problems, but this one certainly was. However, the best Mario Circuit from the SNES era has got to be Mario Circuit 4, which is also in 4th place on this ranking. But anyways, the thing about Mario Circuit 4 is that it kind of takes the concept of Mario Party 3 but just does it so much better. It's basically that same track except mirrored, but instead of the turns all being perfectly boring and symmetrical, Mario Circuit 4 goes wild, with much more different and unique turns. Sometimes it's smooth, sometimes it's sharp, and even the road alternates between narrow and wide. It really does feel like the ultimate Mario Circuit, taking everything you've learned for a final challenge. Which, it makes sense, since this was actually going to be the game's last course at first, before Rainbow Road was created, so it kinda checks out. And even though it's a pretty hard track, it feels much more well suited for Super Mario Kart's controls and drifting, as opposed to 3, which was just cruel. So yeah, even though this is technically just another flat Mario circuit, as far as the raw layout goes, it's easily the hardest and most interesting in the series, and if it ever were to get a proper remake with elevation and more road elements, this could easily be the best Mario circuit ever. It's a real shame that it hasn't gotten one yet, but at least we can always hope for one in the next game. In 3rd place, we have the original version of DS Mario Circuit, and it's pretty good. Whoa, don't click away the video just yet. I'll talk about DS Mario Circuit in time, don't worry, but not right away. Have some patience. In the meantime, let's move on to the number 2 spot on the ranking, which belongs to 3DS Mario Circuit. This one brings back the happy memories. No doubt, Mario Kart 7's rendition of this track remains to this day one of the most unique Mario circuits in the series, at least in terms of theme. It's not too challenging, although it's still a bit trickier than most of its peers, but what's always set this one apart is just how many unique elements there are. It still has a nature theme, but this time it's bathing in a beautiful springtime, with pink petal leaves covering the road, and it's gorgeous. Following a mushroom trampoline, you even get to drive through Peach's castle, a first in the Mario Kart series. And even though it's just a small upward spiral, disappointingly, it's still cool, especially after how many other Mario circuits only kept it in the background. The music is also my favorite circuit theme in the series, no contest. It just sounds so much more relaxing and humble, fitting for the beautiful kind of track this is. For the longest time, this was even my favorite Mario circuit of all time. However, after careful consideration, I don't think it's quite that great anymore, mostly because Peach's castle was still kind of wasted potential, and I figured that there's one more Mario circuit that stands out even better. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is... DS Mario Circuit. More specifically, the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Remake. This track. Look, I don't care what anyone else thinks, but this was the greatest surprise in the entire Booster Course Pass. And I'm not just saying that because I predicted it. Truthfully, it does hold a bit of a special place in my heart because of that, but even so, I genuinely believe that this is the best Mario circuit without a doubt. Besides Mario Circuit 4, this is the only Mario circuit in the entire series to be found in the Star Cup instead of the Flower Cup. And when you look at it, it's not so hard to see why. It's got far more difficult turns, places to fall off, and these Piranha Plant's fire projectiles are surprisingly hard to avoid. And unlike something like GCN Mario Circuit, the difficulty doesn't stem from poor controls this time, which I appreciate. Initially, I still liked 3DS Mario Circuit a bit more, if only because the castle and spring trees gave it a little more personality. But then, DS Mario Circuit came back to the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass for Wave 4, and this version is definitely superior. The remix is very upbeat and energetic, but that's the least of the improvements. One of the sections got turned into a forest, with a Wiggler roaming around on lap 3, which is already super cool to start off with. I love how much twistier the double U-turn at the end feels now, with the slight elevation change. Honestly, the only way this remake could have been better is if perhaps we could have also driven through the castle, so that the final lap could be done backwards. I mean, come on, it's right there. And sure, maybe I just want it because it was one of the reasons I wanted it remade to begin with, but honestly, it could totally work and make this track even better. But that's just a minor complaint though. And in the end, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's remake of DS Mario Circuit remains the best in the series, clocking in at B tier. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's still just a Mario Circuit in the end, with a generic theme, so I can't really say that it's more than good, but compared to the other incarnations of this track type, this is definitely the greatest one. And so, that concludes my ranking of all the Mario Circuit tracks in Mario Kart. I hope you all enjoyed this video, because that's about it for my ranking. But what is your opinion on the Mario Circuits? Did you agree with me or not? Which one's your favorite? Leave a like and comment down below your thoughts. In the meantime, make sure to also subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell if you want to see more videos like this. Follow me on Twitter, Patreon and Discord, and I'll see you all soon. Until next time.